Hi, friends. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Hello APGD, a neighborhood podcast about the Audubon Park Garden District in Orlando, Florida. I'm your host, Michael Lothrop, and today we'll be speaking with Peter von Taborsky of the podcast SCOTCH and Good Conversation. You can visit Peter on scotchandgoodconversation.com or on Instagram and Facebook. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or if you'd like to be a sponsor, please feel free to message me on Instagram at HelloAPGDPod. And apologies in advance. It did start raining at the end of this episode, so you will hear a little bit of Florida happening. Thank you for listening. This episode is brought to you in part by Trevor Brown, Audubon Park resident and trusted Central Florida realtor with Fannie Hillman and Associates, proudly serving their clients for over 40 years. For listings, market trends, helpful home buyer and seller tips, email directly to trevor@fanniehillman.com or find him on Instagram at Trevor Brown Realtor. And with me today is Peter von Taborsky of the SCOTCH and Good Conversation podcast. Peter, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. I am so excited to talk to you. I was on your podcast in 2016. That was actually my first podcast excursion.
Might have been my first podcast excursion. It was within the original 25, I believe.
And I remember you talking to me about it, that, you know, it was something that you were planning on starting and you really wanted me to be a guest. And I was all in. And to me, you know, the name SCOTCH and Good Conversation, I was thinking this is going to be like drunk history, right? This is going to be, you know, kind of, well, and it's not.
A little bit.
A little bit. People open up a little bit more. You say that on the podcast that everyone truly does like talking about themselves.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, context and the audience, you know, it can change sort of what you share. You have a really good way of putting your guests kind of in a place where they're willing to be adventurous.
It's usually the scotch.
Yeah.
It's usually a little bit of drinking involved.
I mean, it helps, right?
Yeah, loosen them up.
But even the non-drinkers on your show, you know, they trust you, or it's just kind of lightning round questions. So I think that they're maybe just like trying to keep up, because the pace now is it's a whole thing, isn't it?
I'll tell you the secret. Mm-hmm. At least I think it's the secret. Mm-hmm. When I designed the format, well, I can honestly say I didn't steal the format, because I'd never seen anybody who went, "You ask me a question." Mm-hmm. And I did that.
So the guest asks the podcaster.
The first question usually asked on the show is the guest will ask me a question. I let them know I will answer anything. Mm-hmm. And that puts people at ease. Especially, you know, this guy's not afraid to open up. Mm-hmm. And I find that usually once I get done sharing some really dumb, embarrassing or mundane thing about me growing up or my life or whatever, I find that they're more likely to really open up. And then I proceed to ask them a bunch of non-interview questions. They're just stupid questions.
Yeah, like lots of what-if scenarios. It's very fun. It's very playful. It's refreshing in kind of this universe of, you know, everything that's on the news and, you know, politics and things that people are doing. It's like, it's nice to just hear kind of creative people discussing, you know, whatever comes up.
The contents of the refrigerator.
Yes.
Exactly.
I mean, absolutely.
What's on their nightstand.
Yeah.
What's in your wallet. That was one that I think I used for a little while.
Yeah, the questions are so random, and it's like stuff that people can easily access, and it's just, it's I love it. I mean,
thank you.
You're doing such a great thing. You've been doing this now 7 years.
Okay.
Roughly, according to the internets.
All right.
As of October, it'll be 7 years. You're 344 episodes in.
I think that might be off. I think I put out 349. Yes, today's Friday. Yesterday, but also I'm not the brightest boy, and I think somewhere along the line I might have messed up my math. So I'm just kind of winging it at this point. I don't know. I haven't missed a week.
I mean, if somebody can go back and count and verify.
Someone do that. Yes, please tell me. I'll
this
send
is
you a
really
shirt.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So roughly 349.
Let's call it 1,000.
Let's call it 1,000.
Okay, sure.
Absolutely.
Feels like it.
Yeah, and you definitely have found that that groove, and the guests that you're getting on, really, really cool people from all around. You started mostly local. You're based in Audubon Park. You live in Audubon Park.
Yeah, I got walked here.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And thank you. And because it's not very pleasant out. August
Actually, I'm
in
fine
Florida.
now. We got
it's good out here.
A little bit
it?
to drink, and you got a fan going.
We have a fan. That's the thing about outdoor podcasting. It's its own thing, and I'm ready for fall for sure. But we've been powering through the summer. You haven't really taken a week off from podcasting.
I've never missed a week. I'm sort of proud of it. But the trick is, I record 3 and 4 weeks in advance.
Sure.
And actually, I'm kind of freaking out right now because I don't have anything past next week. So,
well, it's a good thing we're doing this because we can do a dual release if you'd like to.
There's that. When push comes to shove, I usually do, and I haven't told Dee Dee this yet. I'm sure she'll listen. I do one where Dee Dee interviews me. Dee Dee's my wife.
Yes. And
that usually gets pretty high ratings because she basically just will ask me the most awkward questions, and then we giggle and we drink like a bottle of wine. It's bad podcasting.
I love it. I think it's amazing. You are so sincerely in love, and you married your best friend.
Oh yeah, we got that in common, dude.
Yes, we do. We do, and a good upbringing too. I think our parents kind of raised us right.
Good boys,
right? Yeah. What was your childhood like? What were you like as a kid?
Without good role models, I probably would have been a garbage human being.
Wouldn't I mean we all would have, right?
I know, but
especially women in our lives.
There's a criminal in me somewhere,
directing
some
us.
sort of court gesture or
Maybe
something.
Maybe all of us.
Yeah. And I say it all the time on the podcast. I get to the point where I cut it out most of the time if it comes up in conversation. Is my biggest problem is my parents were too involved in my life in the sense that they volunteered for school dances and committees and church. And I was in the Boy Scouts from the time I was 8 to the time I was, truthfully, 21 when I kind of phased out. And my mom was still involved. And they were always around. They were always there. And we didn't have a lot of money, but what we had was the fact that my parents could give me this gift of being present. And as a kid, I found it overbearing. And it's hard to get your game on when mom's, keeping a foot for the Lord at the dance. I don't think she ever said that, but it was almost that bad.
It was implied.
Yeah,
the rules are there.
Mom was around, and now I look at it, and it's such a gift, and it kept me from getting out of prison. And I was surrounded by good people, like my scoutmasters and church, and these are things that I don't necessarily believe in much anymore.
Sure.
Because all these things do have their problems.
Yeah.
But I grew up blessed. I grew up in a perfect 70s, 80s community of great people with little adversity. I don't have a lot of scars and nothing mostly but good memories.
And I think it really comes through in your podcast too, just the way that you connect with people, building that trust. Yeah. I mean, with people that you've never met before too. It's a gift, I think that in this kind of information age and how, most people connect with social media and texting and things like that, we kind of miss out on some voice conversations that this is, I mean, I love podcasting for that very reason. And your podcast in particular was a huge inspiration in my doing this.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's like, you just had this idea and you went with it, and it's your own thing and you have complete control over it. You are self-produced.
It's very self-produced.
That's a great thing. It's like, you can make it what you want, and the barriers to entry are very low. It's, just hosting a podcast and having some equipment.
I always wanted to be a musician growing up, but somewhere between my head and my fingers or my voice, it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
So this is the closest I've ever come to making a record. And I always say it's an album that has 349 tracks on it. Mm-hmm. And every week I just take and throw a track at the wall. And sometimes people go, that's amazing. And sometimes people go, that was terrible.
That's with anything creative too,
sometimes
right?
I'll put a track out and I'm like, what am I doing with my life? This is such a horrible decision. Why did I say that? There's no way I can cut that little segment out. And I'll tell Dee Dee, I was like, don't listen to that. Please don't listen. You don't want to hear what I just said. And bless her heart, she lets me do my thing, and I do it professionally now, and I make some money. No one's getting rich podcasting, but at the end of the day, I pay my bills and there's a little scratch left over.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I got cool sponsors, and I get to talk to cool people for a living.
You really do. And I love that you have a whiskey company from the UK that is a sponsor now. So it's officially, and we're drinking some of their scotch right now. This is a delight.
You're drinking, what are you drinking? You're drinking the Peat Monster?
Peat Monster.
Yeah, that's my favorite.
That's so good.
When I started, the running joke was, when I started it, we called it Scotch A Good Conversation because I just hoped people would bring me scotch. Like that was like, I can't afford scotch. So maybe if I invite my friends over, they'll bring me a bottle of scotch or a six-pack. Of course
they will. They have to, right?
Nobody got the joke. Well, sometimes people did. But for the most part, I expected everybody to bring me scotch because that's the kind of guy I am.
Yeah.
And the running joke was the official scotch of Scotch and Good Conversation from episode 1 to whenever Compass Box came on was like a $9 bottle of scotch. It was just garbage scotch.
I did try your scotch.
It wasn't terrible.
The monkey paw that I brought was a little.
I was
very into that.
A little better. Yeah.
It was passable though.
Then I tried some Compass Box, and then I went to a Compass Box tasting at Little Indies. And the minute was over, I approached their rep, a guy named Pete, just this wonderful human being I've become pretty good friends with now. And I was like, look, what do I got to do to have you guys come on?
Wow.
And he said, let me listen to the little podcast. And he got back to me and he said, I talked to my people and here's what we can do for you. And, the biggest problem at the beginning of the pandemic for me personally, other than I didn't think I was going to live through it.
Yeah.
Knock on wood, thank God.
We all had that thought at some point.
They had dropped off a case of scotch like right before the hammer fell. And I was like, this is going to go horribly wrong. This is such a bad thing.
Yeah.
And I was very well behaved.
Yeah, that's good.
And
that's good.
I think when we were able to like kind of peek our way out the door, there was a couple bottles left, and yes, I championed through. And they were the ones I wanted. They are breaking the rules as far as making whiskey goes. The powers to be, the Scotch people, the people who live in castles in Scotland. This is an advertisement for Compass Box. I didn't mean it to be.
That's okay.
But I just I'm passionate about them.
Yeah.
They're telling John Glasser, the guy who owns the company, the man, they're like, you can't do that. And he's like, no, I can do whatever I want. The rules are meant to be broken.
Yeah.
So they're aging in woods that no one's ever done, and they only do blends, which a lot of people will like kind of niche at. But usually if I'll push a bottle out or I'll give somebody a sip, they'll go, wow, that's kind of a game changer.
Yeah.
So.
It's not, it's about the end product.
Yeah.
And, I think people, if they open up to blends, they'll realize that those are some of the best.
There's a little bit of magic happening.
Yeah, there really is.
Yeah.
How many of your guests do drink scotch while they're on?
Not so much anymore, because most my guests I was using Zoom up until recently. I don't do a whole lot of like in studio. And by that I mean my spare bedroom. In studio guests anymore, because I've lucked out where I get to talk to some bigger names.
Absolutely.
I hate saying that because that sounds like I'm bragging, but I've got to talk to a couple of my heroes. Legitimate rock stars and directors and authors and TV people, and sometimes I'm just like pinching myself during an interview and going, why am I talking to this person?
I'm always amazed. Who are some of your favorites that you've talked to?
Well, actually, I didn't even realize until I put it on. Mike Watt from the Minutemen and Firehose, that freaked me out.
Yeah.
It's such a little known band. And you might know a band called Guadalcanal Diary from the 80s.
I've heard the name. I'm not familiar with their stuff.
Murray Attaway is one of my all-time favorite singer-songwriters. He's up there with like Elvis Costello and Bono and Paul Westerberg from The Replacements. And I reached out to him. He sent me an email right before like we were to record. He said, "Look, just don't ask me anything that can be easily Googleable."
Okay.
And I went, "Trust me, that's not what I do." I'm going to bring up stuff that you've never talked about in an interview.
Yeah.
And he got done, and he was like, "That was a lot of fun." And I was like, "Oh my God,
that's so cool." That's like the best compliment.
Yeah,
right?
It's. I just interviewed
Chris Simpson
from Mineral.
Yeah,
and
that was a great interview.
And the Gloria record. And he, without asking, he posted on his own Facebook page, and he said it was fun. I think the quote was like, "It was fun. It was kind of like a game show."
Yes, it really is. That's such a good observation.
And I was like, "I'll take that."
He's a really cool guy.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that interview.
Thank you. Yeah, I was real happy with the way it came out, and it was easy. Sometimes it's like pulling teeth, and I want to go, "Why did you volunteer?" To talk to me.
And what did they expect, right? It's interesting when you get in that scenario. I haven't yet, but I figure, I mean, it's one of those things like people do enjoy, I think, talking about what they love, and that's a lot of what you bring out, and just kind of random curveballs too.
Sometimes people have an agenda, and especially people who have a PR person, because they'll have stuff stacked up where they'll have you got 20 minutes to talk to this person, and they want to get their points out, and I want to ask them, what happened to waterbeds, or what's the king of cheese, like just something totally random and dumb.
I love that spinal fluid question that you had for
what would spinal fluid taste like? A drink.
Yes.
What would a drink made out of spinal fluid taste like?
Yes.
Yeah. What would it be called?
The pew pew pew
it was
interview.
That
was a really fun one.
Yeah.
It like one of the things that came to mind too, listening to some of your recent stuff, is like it does kind of feel like just band people hanging out, like a band practice.
Well, that's a compliment. Thank you very much.
It truly, because I grew up being in bands.
Yeah, you're a rock star.
It was such a great way to grow up, like those conversations and creative people, and especially that get to live that life of just kind of playing for a living. I mean, it's work obviously, and it being on the road is no joke, but I think it's a certain mentality that you really click with. And they get that, it's like that's not something that you can really fake.
Oh no, it's all clever editing. I'm crying inside most of the time. I'm way less cool than it seems on the podcast. I got like 40 minutes out of every episode.
Well, and we were talking about that the other day, you and I.
I showed you all the edits.
Yes, and like I mean, I think that can go a long way, especially when you've been doing this as long as you have. It's like, you don't want to tell kind of the same story. Yep. People that are regular listeners are like, okay, he's doing this story.
No one needs or wants to hear about when I lost my virginity again.
Right.
I don't even want to think about it.
Yeah. Was it a psychedelic fur song? Or wait, no, I'm mixing up stories.
I don't know.
Okay. All right.
Also, there's a good deal of lies just involved in there.
Okay, yeah.
I'll tell people before we crack the mic open. I was like, I don't care if you lie, just give me a good story. Just like if I ask you an awkward question, that's the other thing. That's the way I get people open up, is there's a whole preamble that's not on mic where I say, I promise you, I'm not going to make you look silly. If I ask you a question and you don't want to answer it, just let me know. I have questions in reserve.
Yeah.
And also, if you say something awkward, let me know at the end, because I'll just cut it out. Sometimes people will go too far. Because it's just the way the podcast is designed. Like someone will tell a story and go, "Why did I tell that story?"
But sometimes it's good to just get it out, even if it doesn't see the light of day.
Yeah, that's
especially
exactly
if
it.
it doesn't see the light of day.
I've had people tell me that was like going to my therapist, and like that's a big compliment.
Yes.
And And it's been really therapeutic for me also, especially during the pandemic. Like and I love, how I feel about my wife. I love my wife, but I need to talk to somebody else besides the drive-through person.
Oh my gosh. It really, like, that connection is so important. I think that's one of the really nice things about podcasts in general, is that we get to kind of listen in on a connection like that. And you feel like you're part of it, even though, it's just a conversation happening outside of us.
Howard Stern, Mark Maron, David Letterman, and Space Ghost Coast to Coast are like my influences.
I loved Space Ghost Coast to Coast.
That's what I wanted. I just want a little bit of chaos, some out of control stuff, and some of the very first ones. I mean, if you're listening, you're thinking about going to listen, start in the late 200 episodes. The early ones might be a bit of work.
Yeah.
Although if you're local to Orlando, you're going to recognize some names.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's some really good stuff in there. And, people can skip past the stuff that they're not interested in.
No,
like we all have the intro.
It's a story.
Yeah. No, it's true.
I'm not ashamed of anything.
No. Nor should you
little
be.
ashamed.
No. But the pace does matter. I mean, people, when you have a podcast that's a couple hours, sometimes it's sort of, it gets a little tricky to keep people's attention for that period of time.
I've dialed it back. I think they hover around 50 minutes now.
Yes, that's perfect. That's a sweet spot.
The longest one I ever did was with Joseph Martins from the Hindu Cowboys. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know Joseph. He's a talker.
Okay.
Yeah, and he tells this story about jumping on stage with U2 and commandeering Bono's guitar and singing a song. And it worked out that I actually was at that show.
Wow.
It was in Tampa. And I knew this going in, but I had never heard the full story. And literally, it's about a 50-minute just that, just that. And then
you can't cut that out either, right?
I mean, because it was just too good. Like, I mean, who does that?
Right.
Like, who gets on stage with Bono, talks him into taking his guitar? They all leave.
Yeah.
And Joseph Martins did a song called "An Eye for an Eye Makes the Whole World Go Blind," which is so bad hippie. Like it's just so. Joseph, if you're listening, I'm sorry, but I was there and I wanted to see you too.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that was the longest. They're usually about 45, 50 minutes. I think the one that's coming out next week, it went a little bit long. I think I'm gonna probably have to cut it. It might be like an hour and 20 minutes, but I figure. As long as it's the time it takes for a normal person to drive to work and from work, or
that's
the great thing about podcasting. You can hit pause too and go back to it.
It's really true.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah, and you jump right in with here's 3 things I know about you.
Didn't always do that.
I know, and that's really nice. I mean, I think it's funny to hear some of the guests like are a little caught off guard because they're like expecting like a big intro or something like that. It's like, oh, okay.
That's on them.
Yeah. They haven't listened enough. They don't know that that's the format.
I send you a link.
I love it.
If you're coming on, I was like, you probably want to listen to something so you get an idea.
Yes.
And I used to do this whole preamble, and this is where you can find us, and here's my website.
Sure.
And no one wants to hear that. Everybody just wants the meat of the thing.
Totally.
So I'll go, hey, Scotch Good Conversation. I'm Peter. I'm your host. Boom.
I love it. Yeah.
Thank you. Good. It's nice to know I'm doing something right.
And you do such a great job researching too.
Oh my God.
Even
it's exhausting.
Digging for the stuff that not everybody is talking about, or stuff that really will bring up a good conversation and a good story.
One of my favorite new things I've been doing probably about 4 or 5 months now is I start the podcast with here's 3 things I know about you. Mm-hmm. And they're usually the first thing I know is like, you got a record coming out, or you're putting out a movie, you just wrote a book, or,
yes.
It's blah, blah,
that's an
blah, blah.
easy one.
That's what they want to talk about.
This is why you're here.
I'll spend about 5 minutes doing what they want, and then I do what I want. And then I find some random stuff and research. It's just me. I always say I have like research monkeys who do all the work. and it's just me. And I'll go to people's like wife's Facebook page or their mom's Facebook page. And lately, I've been going to a lot of people's mom's Facebook page if I can find them.
Yeah.
And find pictures of them when they were a kid, or like grandpa's Facebook page. And then I just hold it up on the Zoom and show it to them and see the look on their face. Like,
where did you get that?
Where the hell did you get that picture? I haven't seen that since I was a child.
Oh.
And then I have them explain the picture and what was going on and what they're wearing.
Yeah.
And it was one of the best, because I was just bored with everything else I was doing.
Sure. It's a good way to keep it fresh. And it's like, yeah, and your questions change every time. It's like you've got some standard questions, but
the first three things are standard, although I've changed them over the course, but I don't think I've repeated a question. When I started, it was 7 questions for the guest, and they asked me 3. And then I realized like people don't care about me that much.
There's a lot of questions.
Yeah, and I was also exhausted.
Sure.
I mean, you probably had asked me 3 questions when you were on.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just like you asked me one question because also, I mean, at this point I'm dealing with semi-famous people or famous people, and
right.
I don't think they have time or patience to find out much about me.
But some of them do. I mean, one of the interviews I was listening to earlier, I think he asked you 3 questions.
Really?
Yeah.
I know recently somebody had like a whole boatload of questions.
Yeah.
Like, and I was like, it was the pew 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 guy. He was fun. I love Canadians.
Yeah.
He was fun. Sometimes you click, and I told Dee Dee, like, I feel like most of my best friends live in other countries or other states because I'll spend an hour talking to somebody. You don't get to do that anymore.
Right.
You don't get to, spend an hour like just gabbing. At least I don't. And all this great conversation with somebody. And then they go, okay, got to go by.
Yeah.
And they're like, I miss that guy. I miss that girl. I want to call them back.
Yeah. I'll call friends randomly, and they kind of are very nervous at first because they're like, what's wrong? Why are you calling me?
Is everything okay?
Yeah, I'm like, I'm just trying to bring back calls.
Good for you. Calls are underrated.
They are. Yeah. And it's like, it seems like such an imposition sometimes because people are like...
Everybody texts.
Yeah.
I hate texts.
I mean,
stop texting people.
I'll text and schedule a call, and it's like, okay,
that's a good idea.
A call on
I'm gonna call
Wednesday night.
Yeah.
So I've been doing that with friends. I think it's just a good way to catch up, and
just have them on your podcast. It's easier.
I know, it's true. Yeah. Well, if they move to Audubon Park, that's the thing. It's like I always have to bring it back until I do another podcast that's not about Audubon Park.
Look at you, Mr. Podcast Mogul.
I know. I mean, I've got ideas.
You want to steal dinner? Good conversation. That was. Yes. Oh my God, I love that podcast.
Tell me about that, because I was looking. I wanted to listen.
Yeah, it's gone.
None of the episodes are hosted out there either.
I can't afford that.
Okay. I understand. I get that.
It was the natural extension of Scotch, a good conversation, where we went from how can I get free Scotch to how can I get free food.
Sure.
And the idea was to have people who had been on the podcast come on and eat dinner with us. But the gag that I thought was funny was we would just chew on microphone.
Yeah.
The first episode, we got all
it's like one of the biggest rules of broadcasting.
It's like it's number one thing to not do. we got crackers and fortune cookies, and it was so bad, and it was an editing nightmare.
I bet. Especially with 4 mics or however many
4
people.
tracks to edit out. You can't get that noise out. And we had a great wine sponsor. Digress Wine over in College Park was a sponsor, and La Femme du Fromage was a sponsor, and Ravenous Pig Brewing Company was a sponsor. So things would get really sloppy very, very quickly.
Oh, yeah. Great food, lots of drinks.
And the idea was to have catering companies or restaurants come in and bring us food. And we talk about the restaurant, and I would get free stuff, and I get to talk to people.
Everyone wins, right?
It's a win for society. And it was really working. And then COVID.
Yeah.
And again, if this is my biggest COVID problem, that I had to close my poor little podcast, then I'm winning also.
Yes.
But eventually, it just got to be too much work. But I told you, my wife was the co-host, and she's the sweetest thing in the world. I don't think she ever listened to an episode. Yeah, my wife was the co-host, and she was the star of the show. I'd get emails, and people would say, she's so funny. And if she's going to listen to this, and she's going to be mad I said it, but darling, you are so funny. And it was so good. And unfortunately, it became a lot of work. And in the end, it might come around. You can have it if you want.
Yeah. It's a great concept.
It's a dumb concept. It's a terrible
great
concept.
And dumb. I mean, for both of those reasons,
I feel like someone's going to steal it. Someone's going to because I got emails saying I got bad reviews, and I was like, I don't care. I'm having a really fun time. free stuff.
They're just jealous.
They're just jealous.
That's what it comes down to.
Is that it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I get it too. So when the podcast, or when rather the pandemic hit, in-person podcasts were kind of out.
Yeah.
That's why, I'm outdoors for safety reasons, but
absolutely.
also we have to deal with the elements.
It's nice. It's fun.
It is. Yeah. It's
tropical.
It's part of it, right? Yeah. This is the real Florida experience. So you basically switched to a model where you're just doing remote interviews.
Thank God for Zoom.
Yes.
Yeah.
It changed everything, right? Just.
And I'm lucky. I had enough under my belt where I got to reach out to some major. Again, not major. I'm not. Again, as much as I'd like to talk to Bono, I'm not talking to Bono.
Well, they're people that we have looked up to.
Absolutely.
So they're like our heroes from our upbringing, like people that
independent rock, alternative rock, some authors, some MTV people, some indie movie people. The people that I wanted to talk to. I talked to Amanda Kramer, who was in the Information Society, and now she's been playing for the Psychedelic Furs for, I think she said 18 years or something.
Uh-huh.
And one of the smartest things I did as far as the podcast goes, the last question I asked my guests is, who do you know that I don't know who should come on the podcast?
Mm-hmm.
And people always want to come up with the coolest person they know.
Yeah.
So I get a contact with cool people, and
you can say, this person referred me. I've got it on record.
I don't know why I'm flaking, but it's the lead singer of the band The Church, Under the Milky Way.
Yeah.
And I reached out to him, terrified because I have both my ears pierced. And one of the reasons I had both my ears pierced is because he had both his ears pierced in the video for Under the Milky Way. And when I said, here's 3 things I know about you, the first thing I know about you is because of you, I had sex a lot more in my youth. And he smiled, and I knew I had him. I was like, I saw you in your video. I was like, you were a handsome man, and I got both my ears pierced, and my coolness 80s level of the life I was leading went up substantially.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to thank you. I just wanted to thank you for the gift of a little bit more game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
what a gift.
Yeah. That's the only game I have, and I haven't taken them out since 1988. So it's been a ride. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm very fortunate. And you're really good at this. You have this NPR thing. You know that,
Thank
right?
you. Thank you. I have been told that. That is one of the greatest compliments one can get, I think.
It's just calming. It's soothing.
Thank you. Yeah. I never pictured myself doing this, but I really care about the community here, and it's a good opportunity to chat with people and get to know people better. It's really fun. Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, I wasn't sure if I was going to have any fun doing it, because it can be a little nerve-wracking seeing that red light and just knowing that it's, there's a record of this now. Like, people can go back and this will live on. But I think the fact that it's not live helps.
Yeah.
The fact that we record outdoors, I think, helps, not being in a studio.
The first whatever have been with friends also, and that's very soothing and stuff.
Absolutely.
And, and I don't know if you have any plans to do people you don't know.
Yeah, I've actually had a few of people that I've never met before, and I was nervous at first, the first time I did one of those, and it went really well. And it was like, I think part of it is really preparation.
Yeah.
You have to have good questions, but also you have to have a good one. That's true. You've proven that.
Our tagline is in
quotes, right?
Our tagline is asking smart people stupid questions since 2015.
I love that so much. It's so
and good is in quotes.
Yes. So it's all subjective, right? Yeah. But I think that, when it's people do respond when you know something about them, when you have done the work.
Yeah.
You can say something that does speak to who they are, so you kind of get them. And I think that's one of the things that people will talk about themselves once they get a compliment or once they know, this person is already listening because they've already researched me. And
they took the time.
They took the time.
Yep.
Right. And that changes that. I mean, I think that goes for any relationship out there, just kind of caring enough to know what's going on in somebody's life.
Especially somebody who's been interviewed 1,000 million times.
Yes.
I'm
sure.
I at this point, like I said before we cracked the mics, I get people who are on a press junket who their PR person will say, well, you got 20 minutes. And I think the first person I ever had to do that was Frank Turner. Mm. And his PR person was like, well, you got a hard 30. And I went, yeah, cool. Okay, hard 30. Mm-hmm. And then I looked up hard 30. I was like, what does that mean? I don't want to screw this up. And apparently it means you have 30 minutes to get as much as you can in. And I talked to Tommy Stinton from The Replacements.
Nice.
And Guns N' Roses. He was actually in Guns N' Roses longer than he was in The Replacements, which is amazing to me.
That. Yeah.
And he got on the phone with me and he said, hey, man, I got to pick up my daughter from school in 20 minutes. Mm-hmm. And he's like one of my heroes. Yeah. And I was like, okay, we can do this.
Yeah. We'll just talk faster, right?
That's it. Just talk really fast, which is a cardinal sin for podcasting. And I still do it.
Yeah.
And I squeezed in most of what I wanted to ask him. Mm-hmm. I asked him what happened to waterbeds. That was and he had a definite opinion on waterbeds.
They're terrible.
No, but they were around for a long time, and waterbed land, and like they were everywhere, and then they just disappeared.
Yeah.
And he had and I got him out also. And he also went outside midway through the interview and smoked a cigarette and talked to a dog.
All right. Nice. See, like, where else are you going to get that? It's just like hanging out with him.
I guess.
And that's kind of a cool thing, too, is that you get a glimpse into somebody outside of that, like you said, that sort of standard interview. They know what the talking points are. They know what they're going to talk about.
I find that, like, everybody gets that interview and they're so bored with interviews that my interview is like the anti-interview.
Mm-hmm. I dig that. Yeah, and there are some others out there. I don't know if you listen to Armchair Expert with Dak Shepard. That's actually the story of the psychedelic furs that I was thinking of. He lost his virginity listening to that song.
Oh, see, that's good. We have that in common.
Yeah,
you should come on my podcast.
See, there you go.
Yeah, sure.
There you go. That's my recommendation to you, is have Dak Shepard. He's very interesting.
It's been fun. I've been very fortunate. I've talked to almost all the people in Orlando that I want to talk to. There's a couple, like you got Sandy from Park Ave CDs. Mm-hmm. That was a one that I wanted, and just
he's a busy man.
I know, and he's running a stellar record store, like a just probably one of the best in the state, maybe on the East Coast. Mm-hmm. And I know someday it will happen.
Yes.
I just got Will Walker like recently.
That was a great one. I really enjoyed that.
That was scary because Will doesn't say much.
It's funny. He chooses his words kind of carefully, but like in a way, I mean, he's so clever.
Yeah.
Like, I love hanging out with that guy.
It took me years. It took me like a rock star to reach out to Will.
Yeah.
To say you should come, like this guy.
Who was that? Who
John Snodgrass.
Oh, yes.
He was in Drag the River.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Yeah.
He reached out to Will. I'd reached out to Will a couple of times. And John Snodgrass, we were talking afterwards, and I'd said, you played Will's. And he's like, yeah, I love that place. Mm-hmm. I was like, I said, I've been trying to get Will on the podcast for years. He said, let me talk to him.
That's amazing.
I was like, how's that going to happen? You don't live in town. And then I got a letter back, email back.
Your method works.
I guess.
That recommendation and reach out to them.
I don't understand why people don't do it more. I can honestly say I think I invented that.
I know. I'd like to say that too. I believe it. And I think you are the first Audubon Park podcast, if I'm not mistaken. Like,
I'm everybody's got one, man.
As far as we know, you were the first here.
If you got on your roof and spit, you could probably hit a podcast.
I know, that's true. I found out about so many. I mean, you look at the best of Orlando Weekly,
which is a
like
joke.
The nominees. Yeah, and there's
don't get me started.
There's like and I've 25 podcasts.
I've like won it a couple. I haven't won, but I've come in second place.
Congratulations.
But you know that and $1.50 will buy me a cup of coffee.
Yes.
I don't mean to poop on
no. But people, I mean, some people don't know where to start too, you know, and it's like, it's a good way to find out what's out there, like outside of your own experience.
And good on the Orlando Weekly for getting 37 podcasts, because that's how many are. I'm up. I think you're up too, right? Yeah, we're both up. And
that I made anybody's radar. I'm so new at this.
It's so nice that someone thinks enough to vote for you.
Yeah.
But also, I don't know if you've talked about it. I haven't. But let's say of the 37, let's say 25 of them are talking about it's free advertising for the Orlando Weekly.
Okay.
When I came in second, because I'm the number 2 podcast in Orlando, which I think is funny. When I won it a couple times, there were like 5 after the bidding, after the vetting.
Yeah.
And now there's 37.
They want to capture,
I get it.
They cast a wide net, and I think that's important. It was illuminating to see how many local podcasts
it's
we
great.
have.
Sure. and I went, I'm not going to lie, I went and looked, and some of those podcasts haven't put out an episode in 6 months.
That's not cool.
No, it's not cool because that squishes down little people who work for themselves like you and I.
Absolutely.
I take it seriously.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like, it's a lot of fun to listen to, but you can tell your dedication to it is what keeps it as solid as it is. And it is. It's a very solid
Thank
show.
you.
Yeah.
I've never made art before, and I look at it as art. I've always wanted to make art.
Yeah.
And I've never made art before. I've never found something that I can do and do at least what I think I do well.
Yeah.
And I sound like such a jerk. I find it offensive when somebody does it and then I can pick the
if
right
they're
word.
just half-assing
it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And it just gets in my way.
I get that. Yeah. There's, and that's the thing with almost no barrier to entry. It's like there are all sorts of podcasts out there.
It's very punk rock, which I like. It's
that
3 chords
true.
and the truth. It's all you really need, you know?
Yep.
And I like that about it.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do it, like, do it. You know?
Right.
Whatever. I'm sorry. I went off on a tangent.
No, this is a great segue because honestly, that is part of the spirit of Audubon Park, I feel, too. Is
independent.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's why I live here. That's why you live here.
Totally.
Yeah.
People who really care about their craft and become experts, and they bring something that is elevated, and that is the commonality that you'll find throughout this neighborhood.
Absolutely.
And your podcast really kind of brings that to the forefront, especially at the beginning. Like, you really did have that local focus. Like, you were talking to people in the neighborhood.
The grind is the hardest part of the podcast.
It is.
This is easy.
Yeah, that's true.
The grind, the posting about
social media,
hoping somebody will share it.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael might not say this. If you're listening, hit the share button on Facebook or Instagram or anywhere. Just you'll do it for a cup of. You'll take a picture of your Starbucks cup with your hand in it in a sunset. But you won't share your friend's restaurant or your friend's podcast.
Seriously, right?
It drives me crazy. That's what it's there for. Share all the independent stuff. Share Scotch and Good Conversation. Share Michael's podcast. Share Park Ave CDs and the Audubon Park. These are little businesses, and oh my God. Like,
and it doesn't cost anything.
It costs you nothing.
It costs you just a couple seconds of your time to do that. Yeah, I had posted to Instagram something that was a repost from The Lovely. My very first interview was with Kim.
She's
from
so great.
She's amazing.
She's got a great product. It's one of those places I pop into. It's dangerous having Park Ave CD, The Lovely, and Red Light.
Isn't
that
it?
Close to my house?
I know. It's like 3 of the coolest spots in town.
Yeah.
And it was just about how, like, supporting a small business, and here's what it costs, and it was all zeros because any of those things of just referring.
Tell a friend.
Absolutely.
Buy a gift card. It's so simple. It is so easy. It costs you nothing, and like if you live in Audubon, ultimately it helps stabilize your property value. From a purely greed point of view, if you keep your neighborhood cool, it will come back to you tenfold.
Absolutely. I mean, once East End opened, that was, it was such a game changer for the neighborhood, and we did see our property values go just through the roof, and with the school opening as well.
Yep.
So all of these things contribute, but these small businesses that are able to exist because they have such a following and people are loyal to that and people pass that on. That's exactly what inspired me to do this, is that, like, we've got a great thing here in this neighborhood, and I want to make sure that the pandemic doesn't, we haven't really had many shutdowns.
No, not really. We've been really, really lucky. And I think that's also, it speaks volumes to our neighborhood and Orlando as a whole. Like, I mean, I have friends who run businesses all through Orlando just because of the podcast, and I've been here for so long.
Yeah.
And most of them survived, you know, and it was because we would go and pick up a 6-pack at, you know, the Nook on Robinson, or go to Ravenous Pig, you know.
Total Wills.
Total Wills, yeah. You know, we'd go and grab something, and it's less expensive and way easier to go to Total Wine, and I'm not going to say I didn't do it.
Sure.
But I'd rather pay an extra $1 or $2 to go to Wills or Ravenous, or you know, and that money goes to something local, something independent, something wonderful.
Yeah. If you don't support what you love, it's a possibility it may go away. And that's just the reality of having an economy that is, you know, I mean, things are really hard right now for people.
You know, and fortunately, like my wife and I, because we don't want to have kids, we've done a considerable amount of traveling, and you've probably done this. You go into town and you go, this is the coolest town ever. You know, go through like a strip and go, oh my God, look at that. And I want to stop there. And I wish I lived here. And sometimes I'll be driving through Orlando and I'll be, you know, on Mills 50 or the Milk District or in Audubon and go, my God, we live in a cool section of town.
It's really cool.
You know, I forget how much I like that store or this. I know I want to come back and try out that restaurant, you know, and I want to go get breakfast here. And we're really fortunate. Orlando is way more than Disney and SeaWorld and Universal.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
And you're bringing light to the cool stuff.
Yeah.
I'm giving you the torch, young man.
Thank you.
Take the torch. It is a heavy torch.
It is, you know, and we all do our parts. And the thing is, you know, one of the commonalities that I really find in interviewing people who are business owners here is that there's so much cross promotion and cooperation that happens.
Right. Yeah.
Like nobody is in competition with one another, you know, and it's like, you know, I was talking to Steve from Gideon's, and he's like, you know, there's a reason that I don't make a vegan cookie. It's like Valhalla's already doing that, and they're killing it.
Don't want to step on that.
Yeah, and it, like that makes perfect sense. There's just that sense of like, you know, we're doing this one thing and we're doing it like really awesome. We can do maybe this other thing because nobody's really doing.
Have a cookie.
I know. I mean, they're amazing. Yeah, he brought over some cookies. And,
lucky.
Wow. Yeah, it's good stuff. And it's like right there too. And so you grew up in.
I was born in Jersey. I lived in Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce. If you listen to the Scotch and Good Conversation, you know how I feel about Port St. Lucie, Fort Pierce. It's gotten better, but it's exactly the same. And then I moved here in '92. I want to say, to follow a girl up here who not immediately, within about 3 months broke up with me. And I almost like stuck my tail between my legs and went back down south. I'm glad I didn't. And the funny part, it was probably about 2 years ago, I had that girl on the podcast and she sat down with Dee Dee, like my one of my major ex-girlfriends and my wife and I sat and hatched it out a little bit.
I have to listen to that. How did that go?
She's cool.
Okay.
Like she went to my wedding. I went to her wedding.
Nice.
Yeah. Although at her wedding, she didn't have a chair for Dee Dee and I to sit in. So we talk about that on the podcast a little bit. Because I still think it was a practical, the whole wedding was a practical joke on my girlfriend, wife now, and I were just standing there at the reception, and literally everyone's sitting. And I'm the ex-boyfriend, and some of the people knew me. Yeah, you know, just standing there, like, why is that guy here? Did he crash the wedding? Is he drunk? And I was. I had that. That was great. I had and. You know John Washburn from Washburn Imports?
Absolutely, yeah.
I work for Washburn, and I got fired, so I had Washburn on. That was funny.
Yeah.
And Washburn's a great guy.
He is a great guy.
You know, and we talked a little bit, and I love me some John, but it's funny to have a platform to to talk to people.
Absolutely, like remedy those things, kind of follow up, closure.
One of my favorite episodes, I talked to my 11th and 12th grade drama and debate teacher.
Oh, wow.
I had her on Scotch and Good Conversation, and then I had her on Dinner and Good Conversation to talk to Dee Dee. So she got to meet my wife got to meet this person who knew me in high school.
Were they influential?
Oh, absolutely. She's among the most wonderful human beings that I've ever met.
Wow.
And she just stopped teaching I want to say 2 years ago. She was pretty young, and she's still young in spirit. And I love me some Miss Taylor, and I had her read what she wrote in my yearbook. And it was something to the extent of if you stop screwing around and use your brain, maybe you'll go far, because I think you have all the potential.
She wrote that back then?
Yeah, she wrote that in 1986.
So yeah.
And I had her read that, and she started crying, and I'm a popular podcaster now at her, which I'm not. Yeah. But it was, I went to her house. I drove down to South Florida and sat and interviewed her in her house.
That is so cool.
It was fun. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's a weird mixture of people from my past and people from Orlando and indie rock people. And
yeah, and that's kind of the thing too, is that it's always somebody different. And are there more people, I know that you mentioned Sandy, but locally that you are interested in talking to that you haven't yet? I want to talk to Buddy Dyer. Yeah. I don't think Buddy's going to come on anytime soon. I mean, I feel like he's been our mayor for 30 years. I know. Yeah, it really has been.
I wanted to talk to the Cash for Gold guy.
Yes.
The wave-in guy.
Yes.
And he disappeared when that place turned into whatever it is now.
What about the volunteer crossing guard by the school? I don't think she's there anymore.
Is that the lady who waves like crazy?
Yes.
No, I find her annoying.
I know. Well, I wanted to have her on.
She does the thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, you should have her on. I think you should.
She kind of dresses like a police officer. Yeah. We call her Boots because she's got those cop boots.
Of course, yeah.
And she gestures violently.
If you're
with a heart. And
if you're going to right
yeah, like she'll point at you and like do the heart symbol.
That's what's great about Audubon Park. We have those people.
And
people like me are mad at those people. I just avoid that section.
I mean, yes, she will definitely, and she's a talker. So I at some point was thinking I would love to have her on, but. Well, now that the rain is really coming down, I think we are going to wrap it up. But
thank you so much. It's been fun.
Peter, this has been an absolute pleasure. Your website is ScotchandGoodConversation.com.
ScotchandGoodConversation.com. And if you really want to help the podcast and see some behind-the-scenes stuff and show notes, pictures of my dog, I think there's some naked pictures of me up there someplace. It's patreon.com/ScotchandGoodConversation. Also, I do like post interviews with my guests, so you're going to get a little more stuff, and a lot of times they're so like at ease that I get to ask them some really dumb questions. So patreon.com/ScotchandGoodConversation and ScotchandGoodConversation.com. I said that as if I've said it a couple times.
And you do have a broadcasting background, right? As far as education, a little bit. I mean, it's on your LinkedIn.
I'm one of those guys. I have a LinkedIn.
You do have a LinkedIn.
Oh, I do have a LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Look at my skills on LinkedIn, because did you look at my skills? They're like balancing on one foot and hide and seek, and
it was really a great list. I feel like I copied it. Like, you talk about good times, tomfoolery, shenanigans, ballyhoo, all of those
my
things.
LinkedIn skills.
Yes.
I went to broadcasting school, unfortunately.
Yeah.
I learned how to say W.
W?
W.
Okay.
Yeah, so some people say W.
Okay.
W.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. When I started Scotch and I always call it Scotch. When I started Scotch and Good Conversation, I knew I was going to have to edit, and I used to edit on reel-to-reel, like cut tape.
Right, that's right, you were telling me.
That terrified me, and then I realized GarageBand, like if you make a mistake, you just hit go back, and it magically puts everything back. So, yeah, it did help a little bit. So, that $5,000 went to something good 30 years later.
See, you're doing what you were trained in.
Is that it?
That's a rare thing. Yeah, absolutely. I think it counts.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure, and your podcast is really good.
Peter, thank you so much.
You rule.
We'll talk to you soon.
All right, peace.
Hello, APGD. A neighborhood podcast is brought to you in part by Stardust Video and Coffee, Audubon Park's beloved neighborhood cafe, bakery, bar, and meeting place, located at 1842 East Winter Park Road. We're also sponsored by Red Light Brew Pub. Founded in 2005, Red Light is widely known as the source for world-class imports and microbrews. A wide selection of natural wines, plus award-winning beers brewed in-house. A full kitchen is in the works with an amazing menu by Chef Jess Tantalo. Located at 2810 Corinne Drive, please check out Red Light for all things beer and wine and soon food. Our theme song is by Christopher Pierce, and special thanks to Trey Hester for all of his help in making this podcast a reality. We do hope you enjoyed this episode. If so, please click subscribe and leave a review if you'd like. We'll see you next time.